Hey guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today I'm going to be getting into my July wrap-up where I tell you all the things about all of the books that I read during the month of July. This month I read 16 books of so many varied genres and I have so many good ones to tell you about. I'm super excited to get into it, so let's just get into the books. Starting out with, as I always do, my stats. As I mentioned, I read 16 books in July for a total of 4,877 pages. Here is my mood breakdown. As you can see, I mostly read dark, mysterious, and tense books as I usually do. I had one slow-paced book and 5 fast-paced books. The rest of them were medium-paced. I also read 7 books under 300 pages. The rest of them were between 300 and 500 pages. I read all fiction books in the month of July, and here is my genre breakdown. We actually have horror at the top here, followed by thriller, YA, and romance. Across the 16 reviews that I gave for the 16 books that I read this month, I had 1 1-star, 4 3 stars, 2 3.5 stars, 5 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 2 5-star books. Here is the breakdown of how I read those pages throughout the month. I pretty steadily was completing books as the month went on. Then you can see the last weekend of the month, I absolutely went crazy. I read almost 1,000 pages in one day because I was just loving what I was reading so much. I also had some reading sprints with my Patreon that weekend, and that definitely helped as well. Now we will get into the book reviews. As always, we're gonna start with my lowest rated book and we will work our way up to my favorite book that I read this month. First up, we have my 1-star, which was Only One of Us Knows. Or sorry, One of Us Knows. I don't know why I keep trying to add an only on there, but One of Us Knows by Alyssa Cole. This was one of the books that I featured in my new release thriller vlog in July. If you missed it, I will link it up above and down below, and you can catch my full thoughts on 4 new release thrillers. But this one was a pretty rough read, especially mental health rep-wise. We have another thriller author here trying to incorporate DID rep into a thrilling story, and it just became really over-dramatized, really over-sexualized, and somehow really boring with all of that. The gothic setting and slow pace definitely did not lend itself to a thrilling feel, and the shoddy mental health rep just led me to giving it a 1-star. There was almost nothing redeemable about this book. But again, if you want my in-depth explanations about the mental health rep, you can go ahead and watch that vlog. I'm pretty sure I ranted about it for like upwards of 10 minutes. Luckily though, that one was really the only flop that I had this month. Everything else I rated a 3-star and above, so the rest of the books in this wrap-up are gonna be above average. Getting into my 3-star books, the first one is The Summer Is Ended and We Are Not Yet Saved by Joey Como. This is a summer camp slasher, and we are following a child with kind of a weird home life situation. His mother works on horror movies and she has a very weird relationship with her son. So we're following her letters that she's sending him at camp and kind of everything that's going on there. And then we're also following the Christian over-the-top agenda at the summer camp as kids are getting picked off one by one, and we think that it might be a conspiracy in this evangelical camp structure. I loved the religious commentary here, but unfortunately it was just a pretty standard slasher. It felt like 80s vibes. There was obviously violence against children, which some reviewers took an issue with, but you're reading a book that is a slasher set at a summer camp, so I don't really know what you were expecting. Of course, the teens in this book are going to be slashed. That is like the whole point. Although there was some commentary, like I mentioned, yeah, it was just very standard, slightly above average slasher. If you're looking for for the summer camp cabin slasher kind of vibes that read like Friday the 13th, but maybe a little bit weirder, trippier, quirkier, you will like this book. I've read a lot better, but I've also read a lot worse. Another 3-star horror book that I read in July was Tastes Like Candy 2 by Ivy Tholen. This was the follow-up to one of my favorite carnival slashers. It's a YA book. It's obviously Tastes Like Candy. And this follow-up, the first half I thought was going in a wild direction that I absolutely loved. I was so on board with it. And then part 2 took a hard turn and really got us off track. Well, I really, really liked the writing in this book. It just was really confused. And I ultimately didn't love the direction that it ended up going in. Although I did have fun on the journey. And again, like I said, I think this author has a really great writing style. She's really clever, she's really funny, and I would love to read more from her. I'm just a little disappointed on the direction of the series, because if we would have followed the trajectory that was starting in part 1, and then maybe the second part could have been a 3rd edition in the series, I think it would have gone a lot better. And it would have led to a couple shorter books, which I believe the Taste Like Candy books are almost 400 pages, which for a YA slasher, that's just a little long for me. And my last 3-star book that I read in July is Geek Love by Catherine Dunn. And so many of you guys told me I was gonna love this book. So many of y'all said that this is one of your favorite books, that you were absolutely ecstatic for me to read it. I don't wanna be the bearer of bad news, but I just thought it was okay. It definitely didn't rip my heart out. I didn't have a massive emotional reaction to it. I hate to say it, but it was like kind of meh for me. I know a lot of people really, really love this one and think it's so disturbing. I don't know if I've just like killed every disturbing receptor in my brain with reading extreme horror for so long, but this did not have the impact that it was hyped up to have for me. I definitely don't think this was a bad book. Maybe my expectations were too high. Basically, in this book, it's hard to describe, but we are following a family of like carnies. They have this like traveling freak show, and the mom and the dad were originally in this carnival troupe, and then everyone ended up quitting. So they were like, okay, we need to have a bunch of babies that can't quit. Like, we're gonna be this circus family that all travels together. So they ended up like genetically modifying or harming their children in vitro. So they would be born with different kind of like freakish things about them. And our poor main character that we're following, she is a bald albino hunchback dwarf. It's a quadruple homicide for her. She couldn't have just had one thing, really. She's all of them combined. And we are following her as she's navigating being in this family. It's very character driven, and it speaks a lot to attachment, generational trauma, self-worth, touches on ableism and things in a way that rides a line between satire and ableism at some points. Some things made me a little bit uncomfortable, and I know I have some very, very dear people in my life that are disabled. I know that they would be uncomfortable or not like the language that is used in this book. So I'm not sure if that's just a matter of being published early on. Like, I believe this was published in, my edition says 1989. So yeah, maybe just a side effect of the time, but some of the language was a little outdated. And as for the story, it just felt really all over the place. Y'all know I love a plotless, character-driven book, especially if we have a kind of wacky, morally gray, unhinged main character, which is exactly what we have in here, but the plot was so all over the place. Like, I literally couldn't follow one thread if I wanted to. It was slow and it was boring at certain parts. I definitely needed the audio to keep me engaged. And yeah, it just didn't have the emotional impact that I was hyped up to look forward to. There were some really quotable moments in here, some really beautiful scenes, beautiful moments of writing, but I felt like they were fleeting and the rest of the book didn't really make it worth it. I feel like it sounds like I really hate this book right now, but I don't. I just was kind of disappointed based on the hype that I had for it. I still do see why it's a good book and why people like it, but it didn't have that emotional power for me. I just thought it was meh. Moving on to my 3.5 star rated books. First up, we have The Bitter Truth by Shanora Williams. This was also featured in my new release thriller vlog. In this book, we are following the governor's wife as she is finding out about the mysterious and harmful deeds of her politician husband. We're also following a few other characters in the book as secrets and lies come to light that speak to political corruption, and rich people drama abound. I love that it had this setup of being like a political drama, but unfortunately we didn't much get into the political side of it. It was much more rich people drama. It had some weird issues with tense and POV, just like grammatically it didn't flow super well. And I didn't feel super invested and attached to the characters, but overall it was a fun little thriller. I really liked my experience reading it. I was into the scandal and the drama of it all. And I thought it was pretty decent, 3.5 out of 5 stars. Another thriller that I rated 3.5 stars was The Thicket by Noelle W. Ely. This is Noelle's debut and the last book that I had to read to round out her entire backlist. So I will be doing a rating and ranking her entire backlist video that should be out in the next few days. I'm really excited for that. The Thicket was her debut and it follows the mysterious killings that are happening at this local haunted house called The Thicket. If you're obsessed with haunts or things like McCamey Manor, which by the way I could hyperfixate and talk about the updates to that for the next 45 minutes, but we would be here forever. If you're at all interested in things like that, you will like The Thicket. This is one I'm definitely going to be recommending around Halloween time, so if you're compiling books to read in the fall, definitely add this one. It could have been just a slasher at a haunted house, which I feel like we've seen before, but it's a little bit more interesting with the mystery thriller plot line. It wasn't the most engaging book I've ever read. Honestly, I feel like it's a little bit forgettable, but I did enjoy it. I read it on the plane going to Costa Rica and it was the perfect in-air entertainment. Not too heavy, not too light, not too fast, not too slow. It was just like perfectly in the middle. And another book that I read while I was on vacation was Tribesmen by Adam Cesare. This book is set in the 80s and it is taking place during the filming of a movie, and it's supposed to be this like boundary pushing 80s horror movie. Like slashers were popping off in the 80s and all the studios were trying to best the previous one. So we're following the producers of this new horror movie and they are actually filming on native land where a horrible massacre occurred. So the spirits of the tribes people that were massacred are coming up out of the ground and really annoyed with these white people for coming on their land and trying to exploit it to make horror. So they start getting their revenge by possessing the actors and having them turn against each other. I absolutely loved this concept and I thought it was such a fun slasher. I loved the possession element and the whole like land fights back thing reminded me of The Ruins by Scott Smith, which is one of my favorite books of all time. I think we could have gone a little bit harder on the gore level. The descriptions just weren't quite up to what I really like in my horror. And there were some writing the line comments that were kind of insensitive. I tried to be forgiving because it was set in the 80s and I think the author was kind of trying to poke fun at over-the-top, campy, sometimes horribleness that happened in 80s horror, specifically with the misogyny elements, but I'm not gonna lie, it was distracting. It was a good story, but just a couple elements that didn't sit quite right. 3.5, not a bad book, very entertaining, but nothing I'm gonna be over the moon about. Next up, let's get into the books that I kind of am over the moon about. These are gonna be my 4-star rated books. First up, we have my book club pick for the month of July, and that is Phantom Limb by Lucinda Berry. This is a very, and when I say very, I mean extremely dark psychological thriller. Very standard for Lucinda Berry, but if you've never read her before, please check trigger warnings and know what you're getting into. In this book, we're following two twins who went through something absolutely horrifying together, and they they're picking up their lives and trying to move on, but one is moving on a little bit better than the other. Will she leave her twin behind, or is something drastic about to break them? You will find out when you read Phantom Limb, and I think you should, especially if you have any interest in psychology, because the mental health rep in here is absolutely phenomenal. That was my favorite thing about this book. The discussions about trauma and our character's trajectory was so meaningful. The twists were really shocking as well, but that was where I moved down from possibly rating this a 5-star to a 4-star. I thought the interaction between the shocking twists along with the startlingly accurate mental health rep just kind of didn't mesh there. Some of the twists undermined the meaning that I was taking from the book, and there were parts that were a little bit slow, draggy, and info dumpy, but that was very quick. This is a pretty short book, so overall it was a 4-star, and I do recommend it for y'all. Another 4-star book that I read in July is The Truth About the Accident by Nicole Trope. This is an Australian thriller following 3 women who are all connected to a man that was killed in a hit and run. We hear all 3 sides of their story and have to figure out who is the one that killed him, what is their motive, and how are they all connected. This one was so good. It's giving rich people drama, it was giving mommy drama, it was giving cheating back and forth, just like horrible, nasty people and you want to see them fail drama. It was just juicy, scandalous, good time thriller fun. This is a solid 4-star thriller. I suspected that every time I saw it at Target, there was something calling out to me like, buy me, read me, I'm gonna be a fun little thriller for you. And I'm glad that instinct was not wrong because I really enjoyed it. Next up, we have another fun slasher. I guess I was really into the slashers in July, and that is Paradise Club by Tim Meyer. This one was absolutely over the top insane. We are following all of these people who were told that they won this like sweepstakes to have a free vacation at this resort that's about to open up, but it's not quite open yet. But the catch is that it's really just an isolated place that they can all be trapped in, so rich people can pay to go to hunt them. Yeah, and we follow this unhinged slashing as well as the mystery of who the crazy billionaire is that's behind it all. The twists in this book were crazy. The kills were insane. Like, the gore was crazy. The perspectives that we were following were really intriguing. I was actually rooting for the victims to survive instead of like the dumb people that I'm like, please, you do not deserve to live at the end of this. You dropped your keys 85 times. Just lay down and get stabbed already. It was not that at all. It was really great. And when I tell you this book was crazy, I was like, how is this taking the turns that I'm reading? Like, it feels like someone just pulled something out of a hat and was like, yeah, that's gonna be the next thing to happen. I'm like, how is this man coming up with this plot? At the end, it was made very clear because Tim Meyer, I guess, like has an online audience or Patreon or something, and he had his fans vote on what would happen next in the plot. And I could definitely tell his little fans, they wanted violence, they wanted unhinged chaos, and they got it because I had so much fun reading this. I could not tell the turns that it was gonna take. It was wild. I put off reading this one for so long, but I'm so glad that I read it. Highly recommend it. If you like an absolutely unhinged slasher that means nothing and it's just pure chaos, that's for you. Next up we have, oh my gosh, I kind of want to raise my rating about this book because I have such fond feelings thinking back on my reading experience. That is Hex Education by Maureen Kilmer. This book follows 3 women who were in a coven together in college, and they actually had their witchcraft go wrong, and they started a fire in their dormitory that ended up being absolutely tragic. Well, they forgot all of their witchcraft in the past and swore it off, closed down the coven because of that tragic incident, and now years and years and years later, they are all brought together for their college reunion, and they are thinking of ways to reunite in magic and possibly undo the horrible acts that happened in the past. But of course, everything goes awry, and I had so much fun reading this book. It is like suburban rich people drama with the coziest, sweetest, funniest, lightest little witchy mystery thrown in. I read Suburban Hell by this author a couple years years ago and it got me out of a reading slump. I would say the same thing about Hex Education. Like, it was just such a fun, easy read. I feel like anyone could read it and enjoy it. This is kind of like a no thoughts, head empty, just fun type of book. And the more that I think about it, the less I can really pick apart anything about it. There wasn't a lot of meaning to it, but does there always really need to be? I don't know. This was just spooky fun. And my last 4-star book I have to talk about is First Light by Liz Kieran. This is the sequel to Knight's Edge, which was one of my favorites of last year, so it set a pretty high bar. Unfortunately, the sequel didn't quite measure up to it, but it did have the bisexual vampire vibes that I absolutely adored in the first one. The plot was just a little bit confused, a little bit all over the place. Didn't really follow the exact trajectory that I was looking for to complete out the first book. It felt like it went in a totally new direction, and I wanted a little bit more closure. But other than that, little nitpicky things really just based on my love for the first book. It was really well written. I absolutely loved our main character as I did in the first one. And I think it was definitely worth the read. 4 stars. And before we get to my favorites of the month, we have to touch on my 4.5 out of 5-star reads. These ones were right there, so close to becoming new faves, but they just missed the mark. The first one is Surprise, another slasher. That is The Final Slaughter by Sergio Gomez. This one was the final book in a trilogy of slashers that take place at Camp Slaughter, where a totally unhinged, crazy, cannibalistic serial killer with mommy issues is just running wild. And all of the survivors from the previous 2 books are joining together to try to take him down. I thought this was the perfect end to the series. It had all the nostalgic vibes. It read like a perfect slasher with the summer camp energy of Friday the 13th, and the final characters had so much grit, and we already knew some things about them that I did feel attached to them. And of course, I was attached to our villain. I love that he was leading the story the entire way through the trilogy. It ended off so well. Literally the only reason why I knocked off half a star is because the editing was really poor. I hate to be nitpicky like that because I know these are indie published, but the amount of typos and run-on sentences and fragmented sentences and tense issues in this book, I really think it could have easily been solved by a second editing pass. So that was the only thing holding this book back from being a new favorite. I know, don't roast me over a fucking fire for being so nitpicky, but it was distracting. And the other 4.5 out of 5-star book was Pink Glass Houses by Asha Elias. This is basically Big Little Lies set in Miami. All of the suburban mommy drama and rich people drama as we follow a girl who is new to town, and she is taking on the established queen bee group of moms on Miami Beach, trying to win the coveted spot as the head of the PTA. And would you believe it if I told you that all of these women going back and forth at each other's throats would lead to murder? So throughout the book, we are trying to figure out who is killed and who kills them. Plus, we're following all of the interconnected subplots and kind of like funny drama that's going on in Miami Beach. It was such a fast, easy read, and I absolutely adored the twists. The atmosphere was perfect for summer. The only little nitpicky thing that held it back from being a 5-star was there was just no overall message. Like, I finished this book and I was kind of like, why? Like, why did I care? Like, it was all so dumb. Like, why did I care? And of course I cared because it was fun and it was an entertaining way to pass the time. But I just wish that there was a little bit of meaning in there because I saw places where some commentary could have been added in, and I just wish that it was. So again, not an all-time favorite, but I highly recommend that book if you like rich people drama thrillers. And now we are on to my top 2 books of the month. I'm so excited to share them with you. And how crazy, neither of these are horror or thriller books. I know, these like crazy outliers, not my usual taste, made it to the top. First up, we have Funny Story by Emily Henry. I read this one on vacation and I absolutely adored this book. Oh my god, this might be behind January and Augustus. I think this is my favorite Emily Henry couple. We are following two people who got dumped by their long-term partners. Because their partners moved in together, they were like, well, it just makes sense for us to move in together as well. So they are roommates and there's this like forced proximity there, but they're obviously both grieving their ended relationships. They end up grieving together and blooming a friendship and romance from there. It is so adorable. It has this like very small town feel to it. And I just loved our two main characters. Our female main character is bookish and such a perfectionist, very straight-laced, and it just feels like any bookish girl. Like if you are picking up this book, you're going to relate to our main female character. And then I adored the main male character as well. I know a lot of people are not loving him, but something about him just really appealed to me. He is giving like kind of dirty, irresponsible, nerdy stoner, and I absolutely love that. I just think that that is very charming. I don't know, I couldn't tell you why. There's no annoying third act miscommunication. As always with Emily Henry books, there's always a very clear emotional trajectory and an arc, not only for the relationship, but for each individual character. I loved the setting. I loved the writing. The banter was adorable. It just went by in a breeze. Like this book went by in a little breeze, and I read it in Costa Rica. So it was like this tropical, fun, sweet, emotional story. Had it on audio at one point because I couldn't stop reading it. I physically could not put it down, but I had to get ready for dinner. So I was like, let me just put on the audio. And I was listening to it in the shower and I literally cried in the shower. And Cameron was like, okay, we're on vacation. Like, why are you crying in the shower? Like, what's wrong? And I'm like, it's literally this book. Like, it's so cute. There's trauma rep in here. There is grief scenes in here. It has everything. It will make you laugh. It will make you cry. It will make you swoon. Emily Henry just does it again. And the last book that I have to talk about in this video, my favorite book that I read in all of July, is a YA dystopian romance. What's going on? It's also the last book in a series that I've been so invested in for the past few years, and that is Rain. This is the last book in the American Royal series, and I absolutely loved it. Oh my god, I loved it. I was like feeling myself well up with tears so many times during the course of this book because it felt like every single character got the ending that they deserved. Everything worked out perfectly, but there were so many twists and turns along the way. If any book in the series has felt like a soap opera, I swear it was this one. It was all over the place. It was crazy. It was emotional, but I absolutely loved it. Also, Connor girls from the first book, if your OTP was Beatrice and Connor, you will be very happy about the content in this book. Connor is back, baby. Connor is fucking back. I repeat, Connor is back. It just felt like so much fun, but it wasn't mindless fun. It was emotional and meaningful fun. It was so good. I wish I could read this whole series all over again for the first time with no memory of it. Like, I literally want to wipe my brain of the series just so I can start it over. Even if you are not a YA reader, which I usually am not, I feel like you will love this series. Obviously, I don't want to give away the plot of this book, but where the series starts out in book 1, which is just called American Royals, we are following the American royal family. So it basically is thinking like, if George Washington became the king of America instead of the president, how would it be today? So we're following the members of the American royal family: Princess Samantha, Princess Beatrice, and Prince Jefferson. And just like the British royal family in real life, the American royal family has its fair share of drama, including the emotional turmoil that it comes with being the spare, the Princess Di-esque princess, and all of the tumultuous love triangles. I just adore this entire series, even though it's not what I usually read. I'm so happy that I ended up picking it up, and this was the perfect end to the series 5 stars. So that is gonna wrap it up for all of the books that I read in July. I hope you guys got some good recommendations from this video. Let me know down below if you read any of these books and enjoyed them as well. Thank you guys so much again for watching. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And of course, as always, don't forget to go to therapy and read a book this week. I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!